Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Kopijana Ballabha Grivardhari Jaya Grivardhari Kopijana Ballabha Grivardhari Jaya Grivardhari Jaya Grivardhari Sodanandana Raja Janaranjana Jaya Raja Janaranjana Sodanandana Raja Janaranjana Jaya Raja Janaranjana Jaya Raja Janaranjana Jaya Raja Janaranjana Yamuna Tiravarachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Yamuna Tiravarachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Vishnupad Paramhangsa Bharvadakacharya Asadhara Satushi Srimad His Divine Grace Shalasi Bhaktivedanta Swami Raj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Gaur Premanande Haribo Slava Okulpani Bhaktima Slava Shri Guru Shri Grangi Om Vishnu Varaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutaya Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Vicharane Nirvishesha Srinivadi Bhaskadhyadis. Om Agyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakshur Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Mirobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Pandeham Shiguro Shiyuta Parakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sagradatam Sahagana Raganatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Prijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Visakans Vitams Cha Hey Krishna Karna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishubhanu Sudadevi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakapa Trubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vyevacha Patidanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Pranityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 6, Creation of the Universal Form. We start with text 29. Tartiyena Svabhavena Bhagavan Nabhim Ashvita Ubayar Antaram Vyoma Ye Rudra Parshadam Gana Tartiyena Svabhavena Bhagavan Nabhim Ashvita Ubayar Antaram Vyoma Ye Rudra Parshadam Gana Kartiyena Svabhavena Bhagavan Nabhimashita Ubayar Antaram Vyoma Ye Rudra Parshadam Gana Kartiyena Svabhavena Bhagavan Nabhimashita Ubayar Antaram Vyoma Ye Rudra Parshadam Gana. Go ahead. Tartiyena Svabhavena Bhagavan Nabhimashita Ubayantaram Vyoma Ye Rudra Parshadam Gana. Tartiyena Svabhavena Bhagavan Nabhimashita Ubayantaram Vyoma Ye Rudra Parshadam Gana. Tartiyena. By excessive development of the third mode of material nature. The mode of ignorance. Svabhavena. By such nature. Bhagavat Nabhim. The abominable navel of the gigantic form of the personality of Godhead. Ashrita. Thus, those who are so situated. Abhayo, between the two. Antaram, in between. Vyoma, the sky. Yea, all of whom. Rudra Parshadam, associates of Rudra. Gana, population. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Living entities who are associates of Rudra develop in the third mode of material nature, or ignorance. They are situated in the sky between the earthly planets and the heavenly planets. Purport. This middle portion of the sky is called Bhurvarloka, as confirmed by both Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti and Srila Jiva Goswami. In Bhagavad Gita is stated that those who develop in the mode of passion are situated in the middle region. Those who are situated in the mode of goodness are promoted to the regions of the demigods. Those who are situated in the mode of passion are placed in human society, and those who are situated in the mode of ignorance are placed in the society of animals or ghosts. There are no contradictions in this conclusion. Numerous living entities are distributed all over the universe in different planets and are so situated in terms of their own qualities in the modes of material nature. The next text. Vakato vartata brahma purushasya kurudavdvaha yastun mukatvad varnanam muko bud brahmano guru. O chief of the Kuru dynasty, the Vedic wisdom became manifested from the mouth of the Varata, the gigantic form. Those who are inclined to this Vedic knowledge are called Brahmanas, and they are the natural teachers and spiritual masters of all the orders of society. Purport is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 4.13. The four orders of human society developed with the order of the body of the gigantic form. The body divisions are the mouth, arms, waist, and legs. Those who are situated in the mouth are called Brahmanas. Those who are situated on the arms are called Kshatriyas. Those who are situated on the waist are called Vaishyas. And those who are situated on the legs are called Shudras. Everyone is situated in the body of the Supreme in his gigantic Vishvarupa form. In terms of the four orders, therefore no caste is to be considered degraded because of being situated on a particular part of the body. In our own bodies, we do not show any actual difference in our treatment towards the hand or legs. Each and every part of the body is important, although the mouth is the most important of the bodily parts. If other parts are cut off from the body, a man can continue his life, but if the mouth is cut off, one cannot live. Therefore, this most important part of the body of the Lord is called the sitting place of the Brahmanas, or inclined to the Vedic wisdom. One who is not inclined to the Vedic wisdom, but to mundane affairs, cannot be called a Brahmana, even if he is born of a Brahmin family or a father. To have a Brahmin father does not qualify one as a Brahmana. The main qualification of a Brahmana is to be inclined to the Vedic wisdom. The Vedas are situated on the mouth of the Lord, and therefore anyone who is inclined to the Vedic wisdom is certainly situated on the mouth of the Lord, and he is a Brahmana. This inclination towards Vedic wisdom is also not restricted to any particular caste or community. Anyone from any family and from any part of the world may become inclined to the Vedic wisdom, and that will qualify him as a real Brahmana. A real Brahmana is the natural teacher or a spiritual master. Unless one has Vedic knowledge, one cannot become a spiritual master. The perfect knowledge of the Vedas is to know the Lord, the personality of Godhead, and that is the end of all of Vedic knowledge, or Vedanta. One who is situated in the impersonal Brahman and has no information of the Supreme Personality of Godhead may become a Brahman, but he cannot become a spiritual master, as is said in the Padma Purana. Sat karma nipuno vipro mantra tantra visharada avaishnavo gurur nasyat vaishnava swapacho guru. An impersonalist can become a qualified Brahmana, but he cannot become a spiritual master unless and until he is promoted to the stage of a Vaishnava, or devotee of the personality of Godhead. Lord Chaitanya, the great authority of Vedic wisdom in the modern age, stated, Kiba Vipra Kiba Nashi, Shudra Kenanoi, Ye Krishna Tattva Veta, Se Guru Hoy. Person may be a Brahmana or a Shudra or a sannyasi, but if he happens to be well versed in the science of Krishna, then he is fit to become a spiritual master. Madhya Lila 8:128. The qualification then of a spiritual master is not to be a qualified Brahmin, but to be well versed in the science of Krishna. One who is conversant with Vedic wisdom is a Brahmana, and only a Brahmana who is a pure Vaishnava and knows all the intricacies of the science of Krishna can become a spiritual master. Vam Vishnu Vidaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutaya Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswatam Deve Gauravani Pacharane Nirvishesha Srinivadi Paskadyade Siddharane. It said that in the previous verse that in all the different parts of the universe there are different living entities, and according to the modes of material nature, one takes birth in a certain place. Generally, those who take birth in the heavenly planets are in the mode of goodness. Those who take birth on the earthly planets are in the mode of passion, and other places are in the mode of ignorance. The material world is generally situated in the mode of ignorance. As we can see, even if there's some passion or goodness, it's always influenced by ignorance. And how do we know we're influenced by ignorance? Because we misidentify ourselves with this body, for instance. That's due to ignorance. And we misidentify other things, like, for instance, we don't see everyone and everything in relation to Krishna. That's also due to ignorance. Now, one is supposed to, in human form of life, try to elevate oneself to the mode of goodness. The good mode of goodness is characterized by tatra sadvat nimaladvat prakashakamna anamayam sukha sangena bananti jnana sangena chagnaga. The mode of goodness is characterized by two things, happiness and knowledge. Tatra sadve nimaladvat, purity, prakashakam anamayam. And prakasha, one is able to see things properly, anamalam, without being influenced by the dirtiness of material conceptions. Sukha sangena bananti, but still one is bound by this idea that I'm happy, that everything's all right. The problem in the heavenly planets is not that they have everything, but they don't have the inspiration to become fully Krishna conscious. Of course, everyone in the heavenly planets, amongst the demigods, to one extent or another, is aware of Krishna as being the proprietor, the controller, and the friend, and therefore they serve him faithfully in the heavenly planets. Here, we're not aware of Krishna, and therefore it's very difficult to figure out what is our duty and how to do it faithfully. And therefore there's not much interest, for instance, as Krishna says, Yomam evam asambuddho janati purushottama sasarvavit bhajante mam sarvabhavena bharata. That anyone who knows me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead without doubting is said to be the knower of everything, and therefore engages himself in full devotional service. Iti guyatama shastram idam yuktva mayanaga etam bhutva buddhimutsat kritat kritastra bharata. That this is the most confidential part of all the Vedic knowledge. That whoever knows this will become wise, and his endeavors will know perfection. So generally speaking, the conditioned soul has come to the material world to get away from Krishna. Although it's impossible to get away from Krishna, one is always 100% dependent upon Krishna. But one accepts illusion to think oneself to be apart from Krishna. Now, since we've been brought up in a society of demons, asuras, where the aim of life is to forget God and only pray to God if one needs something, and if He's there and He can supply us what we want for our sense gratification, then He's welcome. Otherwise, we have no need for Him. And what to speak of the idea that He is actually the proprietor of everything. And to put that in practical terms, people don't like to hear that. They like to hear about a God who's somewhere in the clouds, and He awards good things to good people. That they like to hear about. But not that God is the proprietor of everything. I'm the king of my house, I'm the king of my domain, and God, He may have His own kingdom. So He has His kingdom and I have my kingdom. And if He can, out of His generosity, if He can supply things to my kingdom, then we worship Him. Nice person. Otherwise, He's more or less useless in my life. But the fact is that Maya, as Krishna is everywhere, so Maya is also everywhere. Therefore, Krishna Vahimukha Bhogavanchatare, Ikatastatare Japatiyadare. That as soon as we turn our face away from Krishna, then Maya is there to put us into the modes of passion and ignorance, or some flavor of the mode of goodness also. But it is not to the soul's advantage to experience the material energy, although it may be very attractive to the conditioned soul, because that's what the conditioned soul, especially modern society, is driven by conceptions that it's possible to be happy in the material energy. That by some arrangement, especially made by technology and anything that technology influences and that's produced by industry, can actually satisfy the soul. Now, of course, Srila Prabhupada never decried the products of industry if they're used in Krishna service, nirbandha Krishna sambandhe yukta vairagi uchate. But most people are not producing the articles of industry and technology for devotional service. They're producing it more or less for distraction into thinking that there's some means of material arrangement that will make the soul happy in the material world. And therefore, people are allured by this, and they don't take much interest in actual, real spiritual life. They don't understand the value of spiritual life because they're in the ignorance and passion, of which there's no indication of what real spiritual life is. Ignorance and passion means that one is, to a greater extent, absorbed in simply material existence, which means that the aim of life, as Krishna says, is to gratify the senses, either in a gross way, in the animalistic way, or in the subtle way, to gratify the mind, or the false ego especially. Therefore, unless one can come to the mode of goodness, then it's impossible to understand what experience. Understanding is one thing. Understanding is not sufficient to experience. Just like we read. First of all, we read whatever we read today. The question is, how much did we remember what we read? Now, if we didn't read it, imagine you ate a huge meal, and probably said, the elephant eats this much, and it passes this much stool. So there's no real benefit for the elephant. So if we hear, and we can't remember what we heard, then we heard this much, and we forgot that much. And this is what we wound up remembering. Now, if we can remember something, that's good. But then if we can remember something that actually has some value that we can put into practice, that's much better. That actually means something. We can memorize millions of verses. We can parrot like a parakeet. Dharma kshetre, kuru kshetre, samavedi utsavaha, mamaikam pandavais chaiva, kema kurvata sanjaya, sanjaya vacha. We can go on like that. One time I was in Dallas, Prabhupada came to visit. And in Dallas, we were always having a competition. I was the temple president of Austin. I was the temple president of Dallas. Twice, actually, twice. Houston Temple twice. Austin Temple only once, over different years. But I used to visit because Austin, Texas is fairly close to Dallas, Texas, where the Gurukul was. And in Gurukul, we had, in the Dallas temple, they had deities, so there was always a Maha plate. And if you could memorize a whole chapter of the Bhagavad Gita and recite it, then you were eligible to get the Maha plate. So that was my first impetus to remember a whole chapter from the Bhagavad Gita. Unfortunately for me, there were two Gurukul students who had really good memories. Leela Smaranam, Krishna Smaranam, and another Gurukul student. So I was always in competition with them. I'd always memorize a chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, but they'd be one ahead of me, so they'd always get the Maha plate. And I wasn't there all the time. I only visited sometimes, so I wasn't in the competition all the time. But Prabhupada came to visit. Prabhupada could visit there 5 times. But one of his visits, the temple president, Dayananda Prabhu, he wanted to show to Prabhupada how the students are remembering the Bhagavad Gita. So the 2 students who had good memories, who were always getting the Maha plate, went before Srila Prabhupada and began to recite verses from the Bhagavad Gita. And then at the end, after 10, 15 minutes reciting verses, Prabhupada looked at them and said, "So, what does it mean?" And the 2 students said, "Well, we don't know. If you know what it means, you don't get the Maha plate. What is the value of knowing what it means?" So we can recite like a parrot, but that won't do us very good. Or if we remember what it means, we understand what it means, but we don't apply it, then it's also equally useless. Prabhupada explains that in the Bhagavad Gita, that there are 2, agyascha sridhanascha samshayatma vinashiti nanyam lokasti naparo na sukham samshayatmana. But ignorance and faithless persons who doubt the revealed scriptures go to ruin and perish. For the doubting soul, there's happiness neither in this world nor in the next. So there's a class of people, they don't believe in the scriptures. They don't believe in anything that Krishna says. There are others who claim that they believe what Krishna says, but they don't follow anything he says. There's others who follow what Krishna says, but they don't believe Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They don't really have faith in him. So they're all faithless to one degree or another, but for those who have no faith in the scripture whatsoever, they certainly go down to the lower species of life. But people don't know that. Nitevidu swartakatim hi Vishnu darashya ye bahir artamanina. They don't know that the aim of life is to reach Krishna. And therefore they're worshippers, but of something insignificant. Everyone is a worshipper of something. Everyone admires something. But if it's not in relation to Krishna, it doesn't really have much value. It's like trying to swim across an ocean by grabbing hold of a dog who's swimming in the ocean, grabbing hold of its tail, and hoping that the dog is going to take you across the ocean. The dog's not going to get too far, and you're not going to get too far on the dog's tail either. Therefore, taking shelter of other things other than Scripture may give us some temporary happiness and relief from our problems, but it won't really help us reach the ultimate goal of life. To do that, we have to find out what the process is to come to the mode of goodness while we're performing our works in devotional service, because devotional service is the quickest way to come to the mode of goodness. It's like if we want to fly from Zagreb. Where would you want to fly nowadays? It's hard to say. Maybe to London for some reason or another. Then the easiest process is to go to the airport. Now, going to the airport, the Zagreb airport, doesn't guarantee that you're going to arrive in London. That the only way you're going to arrive in London is you have to get on the airplane that takes you to London. But unless you go to the airport, it's very hard to get the airplane. We may stand on the roof of a building, hoping the airplane will stop on the roof, but it generally doesn't. You have to go to the airport. So similarly, without coming to the mode of goodness, then it's impossible to transcend to the spiritual platform of consciousness. Now, of course, the mode of goodness itself is not impossible to practice. It's not like some kind of mysterious mode that's... No, it means to give up ignorance and passion. And to give ignorance and passion up means we have to give up lamentation and hankering. And we can do that immediately. It doesn't take a scholar to figure out that I'm just being distracted by so much lamentation and by so much hankering. Just hear and chant the holy name happily. Happily means without anxiety, and without anxiety means without hankering and without lamentation. Just pay attention and be happy, that live in the moment, as they say, in Krishna consciousness. So that's goodness. Of course, goodness also means that we're chanting, therefore we're chanting. That's also goodness, because pure goodness, chanting the holy name of Krishna. But we also, during the day, we're not necessarily just chanting. We don't have a taste for that necessarily. But washing our hands, for instance, is also in the mode of goodness. Or taking a shower, or getting up early. These are also bodily activities which bring us to the mode of goodness, which are purifying. Of course, if the mind is dwelling on sense objects, doesn't matter what one is doing externally, it will not help us very much. But these activities like washing one's hands before one eats, showering, getting up early, they help the mind. For instance, getting up early means getting up at a time when the mind is most peaceful, so when we chant, we have most best opportunity to actually focus and give our love to the holy name. Then Krishna will reciprocate with us, because it's not just a mechanical process. I do this, and Krishna is forced to do this, like Krishna told his father for the Govardhan Leela, Karma Mangsa. I do this, and God has to do that. I do my duty, and God has to reciprocate. I wash my hands, and God has to come and bless me. He has to give me the soap. No, it's not a mechanical process. Therefore Krishna says, Bhakti mam abhijananti yavanyas chasmi tatvataha tato mam tatvato gyatva vishate taranantaram. One can understand me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead only through the process of devotion. And one who's actually engaged in devotional service, then when he can actually enter into the mysteries of my understanding. And there's a process of how to focus our attention and give our love to Krishna. And that's what the Bhagavatam class is supposed to be about, or the Bhagavad Gita class, is the spiritual techniques by which we can be steadily engaged in Krishna service with enthusiasm. Then Dadami Buddhi Yogam Tam, then Krishna gives intelligence from within how to apply what we've heard. If we try to apply it, what we've heard, to become more steady and more enthusiastic about what we're doing, or we break that down to a more simpler way, more careful and more attentive in what we're doing, then Krishna will help us to give us the intelligence by which we can do it more carefully, more attentively. So it's always a reciprocation. Of course, the conditioned soul has his limit, because that's what it means to be a conditioned soul. He does devotional service, generally speaking, at different times, for different reasons, under different circumstances. Ideally, just to please Krishna, but sometimes it's to get out of distress. However gross or subtle the distress may be, which is a good impetus to perform devotional service too. It can't be decried. Unless Gajendra was in distress, he never would have picked up the lotus flower and prayed to Krishna to come and save him. So that's very good. It's a way of coming in contact with Krishna also, by praying to Krishna out of distress. And even if we want some ideal life in this material world, where the flowers are blooming and it's always spring and whatever, prasadam is good, our bed is soft, whatever. That's also all right. Like the Dhruva Maharaj, finally he did see Krishna because of his desire to get a kingdom greater than that of his great-grandfather. Or out of curiosity, because we have this intellectual inclination to try and discover things. That's also good, like the sages of Naimisharanya. And it's also good if we want to get out of this material conception of life and find where real peace and happiness is in Brahman, or at least the beginning of real peace and happiness. So those are all good, but especially those, Krishna says, Tesham Gyana Nityukta Eka Bhaktir Vishishate Priyohi Gyani Naryartan Aham Sachamama Priyaha. That of all these different persons who are performing service for different reasons, the best one is actually one who's seeking knowledge of me. Udarad Sarva Evaite Gyani Twatmam Matam Astitasa Yuktamam Mam Eva Nutamam Gatim. Such a person, he actually is doing it more or less out of love for Krishna. He has no other motivation. And therefore, Krishna says, he's very dear to me. It takes a while, Krishna says, to get to that platform, though. We have to be a little patient, which is the beginning of any kind of progress. If we think, well, this sounds great, let me just be a pure devotee today. Well, good luck. No, bhavanam janmanam ante, jnanamam prapadyate, vasudeva sarvamiti sarmahatma sudurlabha. It takes many, many births and deaths to achieve the perfection. Of course, we're not looking forward. I just can't wait till I die so I can make some progress. That's not the idea. That now that we have the human form of life, we can try to make whatever progress we can. And if the more serious we are, the more Krishna will reciprocate with us. As Sri Prabhupada once wrote to me, he said, the more you work seriously to help bring Krishna's other children back to the spiritual kingdom, then the more he'll bestow all his blessings upon you. That Krishna is never ungrateful for our efforts to serve him, rest assured. So the more we make an effort, Krishna will reciprocate with us. It may not be so obvious that we're our seeker or our hair stands on end, do the ecstasy because I finally washed my hands before I eat. It may not be so obvious, but it may be when we're a little bit more appreciative of how Krishna works, that Krishna says, well, before we sit down, we want to get up and wash our hands. Super soul within our heart reminds us what we're supposed to be doing. And then if we do it, then they say it becomes a habit. A habit means we're simply listening to Krishna. And if we don't do it, Krishna says, beep, beep, why don't you wash your hands? And we say, forget it, it's too far away. I'm hungry. Please don't bother me while I'm eating. And Krishna says, all right, sorry, I don't want to bother you. And then Krishna goes far away. And gradually we become like an animal, the way we eat things. So we can take shelter of Krishna in a simple way, and Krishna will help us by giving intelligence. And as that intelligence develops, then so will our Krishna consciousness develop, that kind of spiritual intelligence, so that we think, well, I should get up and wash my hands. This is Krishna's mercy. It's the super soul who's reminding me of what to do. And therefore, Krishna is very merciful. And then we remember Krishna. And then we do it not simply to keep our hands clean, so no one will criticize us for our dirty hands when we eat, but we do it out of devotion to Krishna because Krishna wants us to do it. So that's a further step in Krishna consciousness. However simple it may be, it's a great advancement. We're doing something at least to please Krishna. And then gradually we can make some progress. So I'll stop there. Thank you. Any questions? Yes.
Catholic Pope also have answered a question, and one child asked him why some child born in some war area and suffer and die. What what he did? It's so young, and Pope said we not know about this. Why about that? Why it's will of God like this? Every devotee will say, because they don't know about karma. But how we will explain that we have a spiritual master in ISKCON who is have so many thousand disciples and is suffering some paralyzed condition, and why is God so cruel? How explain this?
Well, because he wants to teach us. Without suffering, generally we don't make any progress. Prabhupada writes in the Bhagavad Gita, Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadi Dukkha Dosha Nudarshana. This 13th chapter, text number 8 to 12. But one of the verses is that. Prabhupada said, without old age, disease, death, and taking birth, there's no impetus to make spiritual advancement. So we think someone is handicapped or someone is this and that. Yes, their body is. But that's to help them, or help others, understand how to make progress in spiritual life. It's actually an impetus to focus one's mind upon Krishna. Otherwise, why did Queen Kunti pray for problems? She said, when there's problems, then the only solution is to rely upon Krishna. And the more we think about Krishna, the more we remember Him, the more we could become free from our real problems, which is old age, disease, and death, taking birth again. So we don't know what problems are. We're identifying some temporary inconvenience as a problem. But actually, if the inconvenience helps us remember Krishna, it's a great blessing. And of course, if there's no inconvenience, then of course we can also remember Krishna. There's no impediment. Then we can do better service, according to Bhagavad Gita. Dukeshu vamanang minaksa keshu vigatas priha vita raga bayakroda stiti der muni uchate. So one who's actually a muni, who's fixed in knowledge, he knows if there's some problem, tate nukampam susamikshimano punjana evatma kritam vipakam. He knows that if there's some problem, Krishna is, this is because of one's own past misdeeds. And Krishna is just giving a pinprick to help us remember Him instead of giving us the electric chair. And if we remember him in the right mood, then Krishna gives us all blessings and we won't have to come back to experience the problems of material existence. And if we came back to experience the problems of material existence, we ourselves wouldn't be in material existence. We'd be always in the spiritual platform of consciousness, of existence. It's like, why does the little child put his hand in the fire and it gets burnt? So he doesn't put his hand in the fire anymore. So we put our consciousness in material existence and it gets burnt, then it's an impetus to put it into the spiritual existence. Yes?
When we are developing knowledge and applying it, there's first information, and then later we should put this information in practice. This step from information to putting it in practice, what does it take for someone to use some knowledge and then the other one doesn't use the knowledge? Is it faith? Is it agyata sukriti or something?
No, it's just desire.
Desire.
Oh, desire. Generally speaking, therefore usually devotional service takes, in what to speak of varnashram, but devotional service, which varnashram is a kind of part of it, it's a partial part of devotional service, karma yoga, jnana yoga, etc. But generally speaking, one has a particular aim, and when that aim is satisfied, then one stops there until the next problem comes. Then one becomes a little inquisitive how to solve this problem. But the ultimate goal, only very few people who have a lot of practice over many lifetimes, they understand what the goal is, and therefore they don't stop just trying to satisfy temporary problems.
So in order to help someone, or to help ourselves, we need to see what is our goal and to aim at the highest goal.
Yeah, well, at least we should know what the highest goal is, and therefore, it's going to, even we can't immediately achieve the highest goal, but we should know what the steps are to go there. And even if there is some temporary problem and it helps us remember Krishna, we shouldn't reject it. That why, anyhow, that's our conditioned nature. And therefore, at least we're remembering Krishna, and that's a great advancement to do that. If we just look at the sun and remember that the sun is Krishna's eye, it's his energy, that's a great advancement. Rather than imagining ourselves to be gopis in Vrindavan somewhere, better to be realistic and see where we're at now and try to make some advancement to remembering Krishna from our platform. Yeah.
I read a few days ago something that Prahladananda Maharaj wrote, that two things are great impediments on our spiritual life. One is egoism, and the other is lethargy. So
Egoism
and lethargy.
Yeah, that's from Bhagavad Gita.
Yeah, and then my question is regarding this, from information to applying. Does this mean that we don't have desire to do something better, and then it's actually this lethargy? Or
No, Krishna doesn't say. That verse is sanyasyasma chaitasa nirishirnamo budva yasya vigatas spriha. Therefore, Arjuna, surrendering all your works unto me, actually, how does that go? That free from lethargy, egoism and lethargy, fight. Renouncing all your works unto me. Do we have a Bhagavad Gita? Because I'm not getting all the words correct. Mayi sarvani karmani, that's how it starts. Mayi sarvani karmani, sanyasyatma chaitasa. See, I just touched the Bhagavad Gita and it helps you. So powerful, the Bhagavad Gita. Mayi sarvani karmani, sanyasyatma chaitasa, nirshirmamo budva, yudasva vigatas priha. Therefore, Arjuna, surrendering your works unto me, Mayi sarvani karmani, sanyasyatma chaitasa, with your consciousness in the spirit of renunciation, niramo nirahankara, without this idea of nirmama, everything is mine, without false ego, and free from egoism, lethargy, fight. So there's a number of things besides just giving up egoism. Krishna says positively, engage in my service. Mayi sarvani karmani, do everything for me, in the spirit of renunciation. And then it's possible to get free from from egoism and lethargy, as we're engaged in service to Krishna. So we're not just trying to get free. These things will go away, but the more we engage in service, and the more we don't accept them, I'm tired, I can't do anything, I just, whatever. I may be tired, so I should take rest. But if I'm tired, 24 hours a day, it's not a good sign. So, but free from lethargy means that, I could do it, but I just don't want to do it. I have no taste for it. And egoism, but what is in it for me? What is in it for my body or my mind or my family, rather than remembering Krishna? Yes, we should consider what's good for my body also, but Krishna is not so cruel. He wants us to stick pins in our nose. No, we should consider what's good for our body and mind, but we should do it for Krishna. Like the gopis, they dress nicely, they cleanse their bodies, but in order to please Krishna. So our real interest is Krishna, that's all. This body we're using it, there has to be some purpose, and our best purpose is to utilize it for Krishna. And in order to utilize it for Krishna, we should keep it nicely for Krishna. So that's not egoism. But I don't need Krishna, I just need my body. That's called egoism. Anything else? Yes.
This experience that you talked about, when one tries to enjoy matter, then one gets frustrated, fried because of bad experiences, and then tries for spiritual life. Is that the only way to get detached, or is it also possible to get a good result and also become detached because one realizes that however good of a result materially it is, that spiritually?
Yeah, that's ideal family life. That's what actually the scriptures are meant for. To give us all the rules and regulations in brahmachari life, grihastha life, vanaprastha life, and sannyas life are specifically for that. To show us no matter how nicely we live, we can have a perfect grihastha life, well, as perfect as it could be, where the woman is chaste and surrendered and the man is protective and takes care and it provides, and that they lead a religious life where they centered upon Krishna, and there's affection, there's appreciation, there's everything else for what everyone is doing. But then one realizes after some time that actually I'm Krishna's servant, my wife is Krishna's servant, my children are Krishna's servant, everyone is Krishna's servant, and therefore one develops a greater vision, even while one is in grihastha life, by the very process of giving in charity, sense and mind control, and performing sacrifice. And one develops a greater vision, and therefore the wife and the husband, they don't feel that they have to always be with each other, especially after vanaprastha is over, that they could they're satisfied by being with anyone. But that has to be practiced in grihastha life. And brahmachari life is necessary, the ideal brahmachari life. One is satisfied. Krishna and Sudama, they were satisfied, collecting wood in the forest. God himself went out to the forest to collect wood and he didn't complain. He was satisfied because they were getting Vedic knowledge. They were happy. It was part of the process. And simply going to the forest in Vanaprastha, they were satisfied because they had already developed Krishna consciousness to the extent they could actually, whatever remaining bodily identification that they were, and comfort they were attached to, would go away. And therefore they could purely think about Krishna. But to throw someone into brahmachari life who has no, who had been practicing playing video games the whole day, most of their life, or to throw someone into grihastha life who only looked at women or men for sense gratification, it doesn't always work as well as it should be, but at least if one becomes determined to follow the rules and regulations, by some practice it could come out good. But if one gets into that ashram, neglectful, not trying to make it the best it could from the point of view of the Vedic culture, then it becomes a failure. But if the wife becomes chaste, the husband becomes protective and loyal and supportive and appreciative, then it works out very nicely. And there's as much material happiness as possible, and at the same time they cultivate Krishna consciousness, which brings them to the platform where they can make their grihastha life perfect as it can be, and at the same time see everything in Krishna consciousness. Stop seeing the wife as a possible object of sense gratification, or as a husband as a possible object of sense gratification, or the children as some kind of hobby that they're playing with. It's to see them in terms of Krishna consciousness and become even better servants of them than one would normally be in materialistic life. Anything else? Yes.
Short technical question. Is it a GBC recommendation or resolution or whatever that when devotee offer obeisances in the temple room, that the first say Guru mantra, and after that even the first part of Prabhupada mantra, if it's not all Prabhupada mantra, or it is not?
Yeah, that's generally what you do. Yeah.
Okay.
But you should say it in a meditative, whatever you say, should be in some kind of meditative mood. Not that, we get down and we mumble something. We don't hear it, no one else hears it. Even when we hear it, we don't understand what we're saying, we're not thinking about it. We just take it as some kind of ritual, rather than a deep meditation in service, which is supposed to be. We're actually supposed to, when we say these mantras, what to speak of connecting with our spiritual master and Prabhupada, we're supposed to connect with the whole disciple succession, the Panchatattva and the six Goswamis. The six Goswamis and the Panchatattva. Ultimately, we should be in Vrindavan, remembering Radha, Krishna and his associates in Vrindavan. We're actually meditating on these mantras properly. Then we won't mind bowing down. Oh, it's so far down there. I don't know if I can get up. No, it should become actually an interesting meditation. Okay, thank you very much. Grantaraj, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Premanande.